The Camp of the Saints is a 1973 French novel by Jean Raspail. The title refers to a passage from the Book of Revelation about Satan gathering nations for a final battle, which the book uses as an analogy for mass migration. The story imagines a future where a massive group of Indian refugees hijack ships, form an armada, and sail toward France, ultimately destroying Western civilization. The migrants are mainly described in dehumanizing terms like the Horde or the enemy, and their leader is known as the Turd Eater. As the Armada nears France, global unrest spreads, including riots in New York City by African Americans and an invasion of Chinese peasants into Siberia. The Armada is framed as a threat to predominantly white nations. The novel portrays the media as corrupted by capitalists promoting left-wing ideas and presents racism among white characters as natural and justified. The book has been widely criticized as racist, xenophobic, nativist, and extreme in its anti-immigration stance. Despite this, it apparently has been popular in far-right circles and praised by figures like White House strategist Steve Bannon and politician Marine Le Pen. The book has often faced limited availability or suppression and was completely out of print until recently. A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind is a 2014 book by South African banker Stephen Goodson. It presents a historical story that argues a hidden war over money creation has enslaved mankind for thousands of years. Goodson argues that usury, described as private banks creating a nation's money and lending it at unreasonably high interest, allows bankers to gain wealth without producing value. Goodson claims central banking originated as a system used by powerful financial interests to control governments, instigate wars for profit, and remove regimes that resisted their control over money. The narrative begins in ancient Rome, where Rome's prosperity is tied to state-issued money and its decline to privately controlled money, which he says caused debt and inequality. Julius Caesar is portrayed as a reformer who tried to return money creation to the state, with his assassination presented as a response to these reforms threatening wealthy elites. The book then shifts to England, arguing that the founding of the Bank of England in 1694 created the modern model of private central banking and introduced permanent national debt. Napoleon Bonaparte is cited as an example of resistance, using a state-controlled bank to fund public projects with debt-free money. Similar claims are made about Tsarist Russia, which is described as experiencing rapid industrial growth, low taxes, and no debt due to a state bank independent of international bankers. The narrative continues in the United States, where Thomas Jefferson is quoted warning that private banks threaten liberty more than a foreign army, and Andrew Jackson is presented as opposing central banking. The book also links the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln and James Garfield to their challenges to private bankers and concludes that the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913 marked the final victory of private central banking. The Myth of the 20th Century is a 1930 book by Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg, in which he lays out his racial worldview. Rosenberg focuses on the Aryan race, which he equates mainly with Nordic Europeans like Anglo-Saxons, Germanic peoples, Balts, Baltic Finns, Northern French, and Celts. But he extends it to the Berbers in North Africa and elites of ancient Egypt. He argued that the migrating Aryan race founded the world's great civilizations, like ancient pre-Islamic Persia, Greece, India, and Rome. He claims these civilizations declined due to the interbreeding with what he calls lesser races. The book portrays Aryans as the highest form of humanity and blames Jews for moral, cultural, and social decline. Rosenberg argues that the state must enforce racial hierarchy and prevent racial mixing. Rosenberg also claims Jesus was partly Aryan and emphasizes anti-Judaic teachings of early Christian Marcionism and Persian Manichaeanism as representing a true Jesus, compatible with a Nordic worldview. He also condemns Islam as anti-Christian, anti-European, and spiritually inferior. The book sold over 1 million copies by 1944. In 1934, the Vatican banned the book by placing it on the list of forbidden books for its attacks on Christianity. After World War II, it became restricted or banned in Germany, and it's classified as restricted material not allowed for public display. The book has also been removed from major platforms such as Amazon in the US and UK. The Manipulated Man is a 1971 book by Esther Willer, originally written in German. It argues that in industrialized societies, women are not oppressed but instead exploit men. Willer claims men have been conditioned and trained by women to serve them, like Pavlov did with his dogs. She argues that men are rewarded with intercourse in exchange for labor and compliance. The book says women are gold diggers who extract money and material benefits from men, using selective praise to influence them. Wheeler argues that women regulate their emotions more effectively than men, and deliberately exaggerate emotional reactions to emotionally blackmail men. Marriage is described as offering no benefit to men, with women portrayed as coercing them into it. Feminism is framed as a system that reinforces this dynamic while presenting men as oppressors. The book sold well and attracted major attention but also intense backlash. In 1975, Wheeler debated feminist Alice Schwarzer, who called Wheeler sexist and fascist, and compared her book to the Nazi newspaper Der Stürmer. The author reported receiving death threats, and the book was widely protested by feminists. In 2021, the book was briefly banned from Amazon. The English edition has often been difficult to find and frequently goes out of print. Some say the book is suppressed for its anti-feminist stance. Others say its scarcity is explained by its age. Behold a Pale Horse is a 1991 book by former US Naval Intelligence member Milton William Cooper. It presents a collection of claims about secret government activity and hidden control over global events. Cooper argues that a covert transnational government has concealed the existence of extraterrestrial life since the 1940s. He claims President John F. Kennedy was assassinated because he intended to expose information about UFOs. The book also states that HIV was artificially created and deliberately spread. Science is portrayed as a means to an end, where the means is knowledge and the end is control. The text also promotes the idea of a coming New World Order, a global totalitarian system run by the Illuminati, which Cooper claims has declared war on the American people. Cooper's book soon became associated with extremist movements and was called a militia manifesto. It's frequently cited as a prohibited title in prisons across multiple states. Unintended Consequences is a 1996 novel by American author John Ross. The book follows gun enthusiast Henry Bowman, who, at a gun show in Indianapolis, publicly exposes an attempted entrapment by ATF agent Wilson Blair, embarrassing him. Blair takes this personally and, with backing from the ATF, plans to frame Bowman and his associates as criminals by planting evidence. When ATF agents arrive at his home, Bowman believes they are burglars and engages them in a gunfight and discovers the setup. He forces Blair to record a confession admitting to illegal action, then shoots him and eliminates all evidence. Bowman then hunts down Blair's remaining subordinates. Bowman and his inner circle then expand the campaign nationwide, targeting ATF agents and politicians he believes support unconstitutional gun laws. As federal agencies fail to stop the violence, the president ultimately announces the repeal of gun control laws. The novel became highly controversial and developed a strong underground following. It was listed as one of the most sought-after out-of-print books. Terrorist Timothy McVeigh also read the book while awaiting trial for the Oklahoma City bombing, saying, "If people say the Turner Diaries was my Bible, Unintended Consequences would be my New Testament." The Synagogue of Satan is a 2006 book by British author Andrew Carrington Hitchcock. The title refers to a passage from the Bible as a metaphor for what Hitchcock claims is a secret global ruling network. The book covers a year-by-year timeline from the 19th century onward, claiming that revolutions, banking systems, media influence, and global conflicts were orchestrated by a hidden elite. He describes the alleged leadership of this network as a council of high priests of Lucifer, who worship death, practice dark occult rituals, and control major book publishing firms worldwide. The power is said to rest on immense wealth. The book claims that secretive organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Jesuits, and Skull and Bones manipulate global affairs to expand geopolitical control. The author also names the Rothschild family, Karl Marx, and Freemason Albert Pike in connection to this network. One repeated claim is that bankers financed events such as the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia to achieve long-term ideological goals. The book has been widely criticized as anti-Semitic, and mainstream historians reject it. The book has faced restrictions or removal from platforms like Amazon and Lulu. American Psycho is a 1991 horror novel by Bret Easton Ellis. It follows narcissistic banker Patrick Bateman, who lives a double life as a serial killer. After murdering his colleague Paul Owen, Bateman uses his apartment for additional victims. Eventually, he gets more insane and his violent behavior becomes more deranged. This leads to a public shooting spree in which he kills random people in the street, prompting a SWAT response. Bateman escapes and leaves a confession of his crimes on his lawyer Harold Carnes' answering machine. Later, Bateman revisits Paul Owen's apartment expecting to find decomposing bodies, but instead finds it completely cleaned and refurbished, full of flowers and a real estate agent telling him to leave and never return. Bateman later confronts Carnes, his lawyer, about the confession, only to find him amused and treating it as a joke. The novel ends where it began, with Bateman and his peers at a nightclub, with no resolution or punishment. The book became infamous for its graphic violence and explicit content and was censored. In Germany, sales were restricted to adults only. In Australia, it was banned for many years in Queensland. In the US, public outrage and death threats led to the original publisher to drop the book before it was released by Vintage Books. In some countries, it has only been sold shrink-wrapped due to concerns about its disturbing content. Might is Right is an 1896 book by Ragnar Redbeard, believed to be New Zealand-born Arthur Desmond. It argues that only physical strength defines moral right and rejects morality, human rights, democracy, and religious principles. The book opposes the Ten Commandments and moral codes in general, claiming they promote weakness. It asserts hatred for the weak, the innate superiority of the Anglo-Saxon race, male ownership over women and family, and contains anti-Christian and anti-Semitic statements. Might is Right has been cited by hate groups, influenced Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, and is widely regarded as incendiary, promoting violence, white supremacy, and anarcho-capitalist ideas. Its extremist content has led to suppression by booksellers, removal from platforms like Amazon, and heavy restriction in mainstream spaces. The Shams al-Ma'arif, meaning Son of Knowledge, is a 13th century Arabic grimoire attributed to the Sufi mystic Ahmad al-Buni, though authorship of the text is disputed. The book explores hidden spiritual properties of letters, numbers, Quranic verses, astrology, and celestial forces. It covers talismans, amulets, magic squares, lunar and planetary influences, the occult use of the 99 names of God, and working with jinns. Its stated aim is esoteric spiritual knowledge, but most Islamic scholars call it a manual for forbidden black magic. It's been condemned or banned in countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and in some countries possession is illegal. The book has no complete official English translation and has circulated in incomplete, altered, or underground editions. It carries a reputation as one of the most feared and suppressed texts in Islamic history. 200 Years Together by Alexander Solzhenitsyn examines the history of Jews in the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and modern Russia. The book emphasizes Jewish overrepresentation in early Bolshevik leadership, revolutionary movements, and Soviet secret police like the Cheka and NKVD. Critics argue that this portrays Jews as disproportionately responsible for communist repression, while minimizing or justifying Russian actions. The author describes Tsarist-era pogroms as largely spontaneous grassroots violence rather than state-directed, and claims they were exaggerated by the liberal intelligentsia. He also suggests that restrictive policies toward Jews were intended to protect Russian society from exploitation, usury, and alcohol trade. Historians have accused the book of being factually unreliable and anti-Semitic, depicting Jews as infiltrators of Russian society. However, defenders argue that the author rejected the idea of a Jewish conspiracy and intended to present a balanced account that called for mutual acknowledgement of historical wrongdoing. A full English translation is scheduled for release in 2026. The Alexander Solzhenitsyn Center has warned that existing online English versions are unauthorized, poorly translated, and often omit or alter sections of the text. Fahrenheit 451 is a 1953 novel by American writer Ray Bradbury. It depicts a future American society where books are illegal and firemen are tasked with burning them. The story follows fireman Guy Montag, who becomes disillusioned with his role. He begins stealing books and hiding them in his home. His wife eventually snitches on him, and the firemen arrive, forcing Montag to burn his own house. When his boss, Captain Beatty, threatens one of Montag's friends, Montag burns him with a flamethrower and flees. Montag is pursued by a mechanical hound and nearly killed during the escape. With guidance from his friend Faber, he travels to the countryside to find a group of exiled book lovers. Montag evades capture by floating down a river, where he joins the group. That same night, bombers destroy the city in a nuclear attack, ending a war almost as soon as it begins. Montag and the exiles survive the blast. After the destruction, they decide to return to the city to help rebuild society. Ironically, the book was banned and burned in South Africa during the apartheid era for its anti-authoritarian ideas. In Australia, it was banned for questionable themes, like censorship and religion. In the US, it has faced repeated challenges in Florida, California, and Texas, and continues to be targeted in schools over content related to religion, vulgarity, drugs, and criticism of government control. All Quiet on the Western Front, or Im Westen nichts Neues, is a 1928 novel by German World War I veteran Erich Paul Remarque. The book depicts the extreme trauma experienced by German soldiers and their deep sense of alienation from civilian life after returning from the front. It's often described as one of the most important war novels. It was banned and publicly burned in Nazi Germany in 1933 because of its strong anti-war message. The Nazi regime labeled it unpatriotic and claimed it insulted German soldiers by portraying war as brutal and meaningless rather than heroic. In the US, the English translation was banned in cities such as Boston for alleged obscenity and customs seized copies. In Poland, it was banned for being pro-German. Austrian soldiers were forbidden from reading it. And it was banned in Czechoslovakia around 1929, with military libraries ordered to remove it due to its anti-war impact. Italy also banned it in 1933 as anti-war propaganda. The film adaptation faced bans in New Zealand for the same reason. Culture of Critique is a trilogy by American author and retired professor of evolutionary psychology Kevin B. MacDonald. MacDonald claims Jews have biologically evolved to be highly ethnocentric and hostile to the interests of white people. He argues that Jewish culture and behavior are primary causes of anti-Semitism. He says that political movements like psychoanalysis, the Frankfurt School, and neoconservatism were Jewish-led group evolutionary strategies to undermine Western societies for Jewish advantage. The work is widely described as anti-Semitic and pseudoscientific. It's rejected by mainstream researchers and has been condemned by civil rights organizations. The books have been restricted or removed from platforms such as Amazon, avoided by libraries and bookstores, excluded from academic discourse, and led to professional ostracism of the author. The Harry Potter series follows orphan Harry Potter as he discovers he is a wizard, attends Hogwarts school, and alongside Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger confronts the dark wizard Lord Voldemort, who murdered his parents and seeks control of the magical world. Despite its popularity, the series has been widely challenged. Critics argued that the books promote witchcraft, the occult, heresy, and anti-family values. In the US, Harry Potter frequently topped lists of the most challenged published books, with repeated attempts to remove or restrict it in schools nationwide. One challenge in Arkansas reached federal court, where a judge ruled on restricted access. In 2019, a Catholic school in Tennessee banned the books after concerns about heresy and consulting exorcists, who warned the book's spells could conjure evil spirits. In Canada, a school in Ontario restricted the series in the year 2000. Bans also occurred in the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Saudi Arabia due to the portrayal of magic. The Bible is the holy book of Christianity. It presents a narrative of God creating humanity, humanity's repeated rebellion, and God's plan to redeem and restore creation centered on Jesus Christ. The story concludes in Revelation with visions of judgment, cosmic conflict, and the restoration of all things in a new heaven and new earth. However, the Bible is heavily restricted or banned in over 50 countries, primarily in authoritarian, communist, or Islamic states where possession can result in severe penalties. Lady Chatterley's Lover is a novel by Englishman D.H. Lawrence, published in 1928. It follows Constance Reed, an upper-class woman trapped in a sterile marriage to Sir Clifford Chatterley, a wealthy landowner left paralyzed and impotent after World War I. Seeking emotional and physical fulfillment, Connie begins an affair with working-class employee Oliver Mellors. Connie gets pregnant, divorces Clifford, and hopes to build a future with Mellors. The book was banned in the UK, US, Australia, Japan, India, Ireland, and Canada for obscenity, use of explicit four-letter words, and its portrayal of a cross-class affair. In Britain, the publisher was even prosecuted. After the ban was overturned, the uncensored novel became a bestseller. The Story of O is a 1954 novel by French author Anne Declos. It follows a fashion photographer known as O, who enters a secret society through her lover and is trained in submission, expected to make herself available to other men within that group. The novel became notorious for its explicit depictions of dominance, submission, violence, and extreme debauchery. In France, obscenity charges were brought against the publisher in 1955. The book couldn't be advertised or sold to minors until 1967. In the UK, authorities confiscated copies and blocked distribution, and the later film adaptation was banned until the year 2000. In the US, the book sold 100,000 copies in its first month, but generated controversy. During the 70s, feminist groups publicly burned copies on university campuses. It was also heavily restricted in New Zealand. The Bell Curve is a 1994 book by American authors Richard Herrnstein and Charles Murray. It argues that human intelligence is influenced by both genetics and the environment, and that IQ is a strong predictor of life outcomes. The authors claim intelligence correlates strongly with income, job performance, education, crime, welfare dependence, and parenting outcomes. The book links lower IQs to poverty, unemployment, crime, school dropout, and reliance on social programs. It also suggests average IQ differences between races, with East Asians scoring highest, followed by whites, Hispanics, and African Americans, attributing part of the gaps to genetics. The book criticizes policies based on the assumption of equal ability, arguing that social and education systems should reflect natural differences rather than pushing uniform outcomes such as universal college education. The book sparked widespread public outrage, protests, and academic backlash. Critics labeled its conclusions pseudoscientific and harmful, while supporters viewed it as a necessary challenge to prevailing assumptions. The book became taboo in many academic and public spaces and difficult to promote, with related ideas restricted in some countries like Germany. Atlantis, Edda, and Bible is a 1925 book by German author Hermann Wieland. It presents an esoteric, folkish interpretation of history centered on Aryan identity. The book claims to trace 200,000 years of Germanic world culture and promotes an occult history of Atlantis. It attempts to link Atlantis, Norse mythology from the Edda book, and the Bible into a single narrative, arguing that an ancient Aryan religion and world culture existed and was later stolen, falsified, or suppressed. Wieland portrays the migration of the white Nordic race across the world and describes a prehistoric Aryan Atlantean civilization as the foundation of global culture. The work asserts Aryan superiority and frames history as a deliberate effort to erase or corrupt Aryan heritage, including reinterpretations of biblical texts to reveal what the author claims is their hidden message. Due to its ideological and racial content, the book was confiscated, banned, and destroyed by Allied forces after World War II. It remained hidden from the English-speaking world until a modern translation was released in 2017. The Catcher in the Rye is a 1951 novel by American author J.D. Salinger. It follows 16-year-old Holden Caulfield, who has been expelled from several elite boarding schools. The story covers some chaotic days in which Holden wanders New York City. He struggles with grief over the death of his brother and feels intense disgust to what he sees as the phony adult world. Holden repeatedly seeks human connection but is constantly rejected. His emotional state ultimately leads to a breakdown and a stay in a sanatorium. The novel was one of the most challenged and censored books in US schools and libraries from the 60s to the 90s, and even banned in states like Wyoming, North Dakota, and California. It was targeted for its vulgar language, references to adult themes and alcohol, inciting rebellion and perceived immorality. It was also banned in Australia in the 50s after a customs clerk found it offensive. In Canada, copies were seized due to obscenity concerns.